Football has problems. Racism, homophobia, misogyny. Football is no longer the casual game for working people and is being monetised beyond all recognition. Families are forced to pay hundreds of pounds to watch a game that previous generations saw for a fraction of the price. Elite football clubs are disconnected from their communities and look to global audiences for TV income and product exposure. Fans have no say, excluded from the running of the beautiful game and exploited by the very clubs that they fill stadiums and travel up and down the country for. Wealthy individuals and murderous states are buying up clubs in a bid to sports wash their destructive corporations and murderous regimes. Toothless regulators allow exploitative betting companies and payday lenders to flood the game with cash and open the door to our most vulnerable in society. But in 2018, I saw something different. I saw a club put its beliefs first. Matthew, could you tell us, how did Clapton Community Football Club start?
So you can't talk about the forming of the club without talking about the supporters group that came before it, right? With the club that we were supporting, and we became disillusioned with the way that the club was being run. And firstly, we tried to resist it, but then ultimately we realised that what we needed to do was to set our own club up. The story I always tell, and I don't even know whether it's true anymore. It's almost like one of those sort of mythologies that gathers its own momentum, but it seems fairly accurate that that group was started by some local men who wanted to watch grassroots football because they couldn't afford to go and watch the teams they supported, right? They're West Ham fans, Celtic fans, mate. I mean, it's insanely expensive for West Ham just to get in, but in the case of the Celtic fan having to travel to Glasgow to watch the team, it was overpriced, it was out of reach of people. And it's also now become, largely through the commercialisation, it's become something that you consume. You know, when you talk about fans having ownership of something, we literally do own it, but we also there is that sense of this is ours, we built this.
What does that actually mean in how this club operates?
So we wanted to set up a club that was not just owned by fans, but run by fans. There's an awful lot of clubs that have been set up on the advice of the Football Support Association who were really instrumental in the direction we took. I mean, talk about sliding door moments. The conversations that we had with them were so pivotal. I remember, the first time we emailed them and just look back at that as such a pivotal point in our journey, because they advised us honestly that it was going to be too hard, but they also gave us the paths that we could take. But so many of the models that they presented were about fan ownership, but you still had a fairly familiar looking way of running the club. But we were no, we want to do this that is participatory. We wanted fans to be running the club, and we wanted the club to be run by its membership, because we felt that was the best way. I think, I don't think we ever really had the conversation, but if I can, speaking for myself, the impression that I got from everyone else around me, all of my friends, my comrades, that we did this together, we wanted to do it this way because we felt that that was how we worked as a supporters group, and we wanted the club to reflect that because we felt it was a better way of running football, a more, I don't know, a more honest way of running a football club. And so what that means then is the way that we're structured and have been structured since our club started running in 2018 is that we've got committees. Not just one committee that makes all the decisions, but all the responsibilities in running things are devolved into separate committees that any member can join. It's that real emphasis. It's not just fan-owned, it's fan-run.
What does it mean for people who are involved in actual running this club, and what does it mean for the community?
A lot of football clubs, they do their community stuff and it's really amazing. But what they do is they duplicate a lot of other stuff that's already existing. We open the doors so that other people can actually take it further. So that is really the big successes of our club have been the outreach that we've done with local organisations that are already grassroots. So Magpie are the best example of that.
1 in 12 children in Newham is homeless or in insecure housing. There are 2,000 homeless toddlers in Newham. The word homeless toddlers shouldn't even exist. Add to that the cost of living, the extreme low wages, the lack of housing, and you've got an absolute crisis on your hands. I think that I would describe it as a humanitarian disaster. So the Magpie Project is a community charity based in Newham in East London, and we work with mums with preschool children who are homeless or at risk of homelessness. We try to mitigate the harms that are done by temporary accommodation, by the hostile environment, and we run during term times, during school hours, 5 days a week. We offer stay and play, we offer clothes, equipment, nappies, we pay travel, we have lunch and breakfast, we offer English classes, music and movement, we have a dancer in residence, we have an artist in residence. So we just try to create childhoods and joy with these children while they're in very difficult circumstances. A lot of our families are subject to the hostile environment, so we work a lot with families seeking safety and people who have no recourse to public funds, which means that they're not eligible for the basic safety net that the welfare system provides.
And how did Magpie and Clapton Community Football Club meet?
I can't really remember how we first met, because I think that we've always known about Clapton. Clapton's our local club and we're just massive fans. But I think we started talking just before lockdown around collections at the games and how they could help. The ground is very close to some of the HMOs that our families live in. So I think we started talking maybe 2018. But I feel like we've always been aware of Clapton and like all the best kind of partnerships and collaborations, it just all happened very organically and naturally and slowly.
So, and how did they help? How did the Clapton Community Football Club help?
During lockdown, they helped us a lot in terms of their volunteers were driving our food deliveries and nappy deliveries around. They also, when they created their branded masks, every mask that they sold, we got a mask for our minis or our mums. So that was an enormous success. In the past, we've also had beautiful branded items and merchandise for our little minis to run around in, which is just super cute. And so generally, they're just an enormous help. We also work together to set up a little training session for small children, so our minis and their older siblings, at the Spotted Dog Ground, which is just such a joyful thing. A lot of them who share a language with our mums and minis, which is just absolutely revolutionary. You see the enormous smiles on the children's faces. So the support is practical, it's timely, but also I think what's really important is that it's without any strings and it's just based on concern, curiosity and solidarity, which is just beautiful. I feel like with Clapton, we're so aligned in terms of our views of how to do things and our views of solidarity and family rather than charity. Our views of sort of co-production and working together. And no matter whether it's a bottle of shampoo or it's a mask or it's a t-shirt, what's more important is the sense that there are people out there who care.
For lots of people, the first introduction to Clapton Community Football Club was the football shirt that commemorated the International Brigades. Can you tell me why it had such a, or why you think it had such an impact, not just here in this country, but incredibly in Spain and all over the world?
We needed an away kit. We'd formed a relationship with the International Brigade because in London, the word, predominantly the British volunteers to the International Brigade were from the Northwest and from Glasgow, but there were members from East London, and like it went viral, like properly. And the story there goes that we got it designed and everyone loved it, and that definitely brought people in. So our membership was bolstered by that, by people seeing about this, but it was still only word of mouth amongst our ecosystem in the London left. The International Brigade promoted it, and it was great, and we expected to sell a few. And the website went down in the middle of the day, and we were like, well, it can't be to do with the games. What's it to do with? It was to do with the shop, because the shirts had gone on sale. And then crucially, it was tweeted by a British football journalist who works in Spain, and it went boom. And well, long story short, we're registered for VAT in Spain now. We outsold plenty of professional clubs, in terms of the numbers of shirts, just that season. It was completely disproportionate to the size of our club. The main significance was really, it sends a strong message of who we are to people in Britain, but in Spain, it was something else. So the shirt is an important symbol, and it is about us articulating, what we want the club to be. We're in East London. The East London has got a history of, not just through contributions to the International Brigades, but it's got a history of standing up to fascism, local to it. Cable Street being the most famous example, but East London has been a fulcrum for this. It's important for us to sort of make some kind of, to remind people of East London's radical history and how people have always ultimately driven this out. We want to make it very clear. It's a great example when people say football and politics don't mix. Is it that? It's such an important part of where this club is, that we need to sort of make sure that there is some kind of recognition of it, and we want to do that. We're happy for our club to do that. Basically, the company that we employ to do it, which is an anti-fascist workers co-op in Italy, we're able to employ new people. It created jobs, but it also enabled us to buy the ground and to genuinely make this football ground, which is London's oldest football ground. It's been used as a sports facility going back a couple of centuries or longer, to actually have that community asset as an asset for the community. The first things that I did after we set the club up was work with mates to set up a new committee. And I think it was the first new committee that we had after the club was set up, maybe one of the first. And it was called the Development Committee. And then what that was is to expand, is to do new stuff. And one of the first bits that came through that was the open access. And that has been a defining part of the club, because we all had an idea about, local politics, and a lot of us had an idea about football. But it took the people that set up the open access to really go, this is not just an opportunity, these are people that have been missed out, i.e. adult women.
So football's always been a part of my life. I think I just loved it from a kid. So yeah, from day dot, my family were West Ham fans. They had Tony Cottee, Frank McAvenny, Mark Ward, Phil Parkes in goal. We had some great seasons in the 80s, and obviously one of my clearest memories is 1986. I'm 10 years old. Maradona's Hand of God. So yeah, I've always loved football. Women that are in their 20s now or 30s now never learnt football at PE, let alone in the world, and it's just this great big thing in our culture that is kind of intimidating to most women. There are a huge portion of women that have just woken up to the fact that this is their game too.
What are some of the bigger issues and problems for women and young women to be involved in football?
I mean, there's so many, aren't there? I mean, I think when we think about sport, we have to have an understanding of the history of sport and the influence of the military on sport, you know, and keeping the cannon fodder healthy. So there's some really unhealthy sort of, I suppose, cultures in sport, particularly in men's sport. I mean, obviously, you know, there was a lot of PE teachers, ex-military with PTSD, you know, even now working in sport in this country. So we know that sort of humiliation, aggression, bullying and that is often used as the norm in those environments, and that can be really, really unhealthy. So a lot of the challenges facing ensuring that our club and our sport is healthy is maybe thinking about some of those power dynamics and behaviours, and like the accountability statement, not being a bystander if somebody is behaving, you know, inappropriately or screaming at players or humiliating players. But there's the wider challenges as well that we have to think of. You know, we do exist in a patriarchal capitalist society. I feel like Neil from the Young Ones saying that a little bit, but you know, the ramifications of that are huge. As a child, I was exposed to a football coach who was a predatory paedophile, and he assaulted me and my sister. We went to court in 1990 and we lost. He continued to be able to work in football and be a gatekeeper essentially in women's football for a further 10 years before he was convicted of abuse of another child under 12, which is the same age as me and my sister. So the ramifications of football not keeping itself safe, and that experience for me, you know, blew my family apart and shaped my life to some extent. So I struggled with addiction throughout my 20s, had to have a lot of kind of therapy. As far as I was concerned, I was a liar. He was a powerful, popular gatekeeper of football. Now, a lot of men went through that as well in that same time period, and that's what the Sheldon Report's about. But since the Sheldon Report, and there's been a whole host of research into it, we now know that sport is an area where people are particularly vulnerable to abuse of power. You can never stop abuse, but you can make it less likely and easier for people to talk about and recover from.
Obviously, you spent a long part of your life, you know, playing the game.
Yeah.
How do you get involved in coaching, or has that been something that you've always been interested in?
To be honest, it was more initially me coming back into football before I met Clapton was just about me reliving the lost years from my youth that I felt were kind of stolen from me. And then I realised that as I hit my mid-40s and started to have a lot of injuries, that a way that I could also enjoy football would be to coach. And I just started to engage with social media. I was quite new to Twitter. And there'd been some comments on there, you know, about Clapton being a woke club, and I kind of slightly aggily pointed out that they didn't have a women's team, and that was a bit embarrassing in today's day and age. The response was, yeah, we know, can you help? So I did. I mean, we have developed, and some players we've passed on, you know, through the club and have broken through onto the first team, and we help them on that journey. They tend to be the returners that had been marginalised from the game. So it's amazing the amount of women we've brought in.
Obviously, resources matter, and you've got you bring a unique perspective, a love of the game, the horrific experience that you have had, which means you champion both the football side and ensuring that is delivered safely and engages, and it's a positive experience.
Yeah.
What's that look like for a club like, you know, Clapton Community Football Club?
So Clapton's come along and has set up a general organising committee and has a whole load of members that have a real understanding about dispersal of power and not so much equality as equity, and ensuring that we have equal access. I can wholeheartedly embrace that. And in terms of what that does for my mental health is, you know, is massive. And what it's done is opened up football for me, and they've given me the keys essentially. The women's setup, both setups, is a larger part of Clapton than the men's teams. Just is. There's more players, there's more coaches, there's more people involved, more of them volunteer in other areas of the club, and we support our men's team and our men's team support us. Like, we're not competing with our men's team. The strongest message I think I can give my player is that this is your game, you play it on your terms. Don't be grateful for being here, own it. Clapton has enabled me not just to come back to football, but to come back to football to feel safe, to feel a sense of ownership. You know, Clapton's got so much work to do, but we've got good people here that want to do it, I think, that, and the majority have a clear understanding of some of these challenges that we face in football. I feel that Clapton is righting wrongs for women in football.
Do you think what you're doing here and what you're building, this model can be replicated everywhere else?
Yeah, I think it can be replicated. Like, I think football can be run like this. The politics with the big P that we have, that we do brandish quite openly in the flags and banners that we've got, it doesn't really need to be about that. It just needs to be based on sort of like what you see community assets as being there for, and what they can bring, the potential for community assets. Folks that are organising on the left, like a lot of us were, right? Like I said, a lot of us came to the first supporters group and then formed the club out of background in activism and involvement in activism. What we all have in common is we don't really have many wins. Now, I know that, like, watching a Step 7 football club, there's barely any better than anything you see on Sunday League, winning a football match against a team of players that aren't even as good as your team. It's not on the par of like cancelling and poll tax. But the collective joy that you get from that, what I hope is that people, and I know that it's true, that people have come through here who are activists, but it has been good for them to be in a place where there's collective joy. It provides compost, it provides a good basis for doing other stuff. And it means, though, that you've got the energy, you get the energy from one another to be in a position to, and I hate the word, but to capitalise on opportunities when they come up. And that has been a really key story that I tell my activist mates about with Clapton. By our constitution, the football club is run as a community benefit society. We are tied then to run the football club, and then by proxy, as an extension of that, the football ground that we own, which is a separate, it's owned through a separate charity. But it is all bound together to be something that we serve the local community. There is an emphasis also of working with like local businesses that match our values. So we stock beer that's brewed locally behind our bar. It's the most important thing I've ever been involved in. I feel so lucky to be involved in something which I've been able to build with so many people that are familiar to me, from my years of activism, from my years of being a football fan, from just work. It's all sorts of people with all sorts of political outlooks and all sorts of dreams and visions for things, but that is building something which is about that. Building something that is about dreams, and it is about a vision, and it is about something other than just the obvious stuff that we tend to get from our work and day-to-day lives. That is built out of love, with people that I might not necessarily have. We're all sorts of a mishmash of different people. I feel so lucky. It's like a form of immortality, because this will outlast me. And to have, there are loads of people that have this. It could be a business, it could be something else. They probably get the same thing, but the fact that this is built out of our passions and our bloody mindedness, I feel so lucky to have been involved in something like this. And for all the pain that it causes me and so many of my mates, it's still the thing that I'm proudest of in my life.